Sometimes I wander about those cliff tops in my dreams, and I look upon the sea. It calls out to me. They yearn for me to be with them. And so too do I, though I fight it. But still, the wind carries whispers, the voices of my forefathers beckoning me under those tumultuous waves into tranquil, deep, abyssal blue. Those voices are carried over the emptiness of the cliff tops and the iron-gray skies above. When I close my eyes and listen, I can hear Innsmouth again, and I open them and I see it, long over the horizon down by the shore. Its 3 spires stand tall for me. I can hear the flap of feet, the chatter of children, and the laughter. Dear God, the laughter. Its spires of cyclopean stature, interspersed among the ridges and the jagged rocks. After a while I am there, walking among the streets. The caves, broken landscapes, and hollowed world around me isn't there anymore. And I see the slate rooftops, the chimneys smoking like the pipe of an old fisherman. Even on the hillside, there it is. What old force could smoke that tower before me? Like those houses before, could there be life inside that? A family huddled around the fireplace, rubbing their coarse, cruel fingers along the floor of the mantelpiece in apprehension for their roasting supper. And the creak of the door carries itself on the breeze, followed by the rushes of motion half concealed. Were not they coming nearer? Those empty, derelict cobblestone gables with the soft flap of wet feet promised in the distance. They are not there now. They are somewhere older still, and deeper still. In those streets of this older place, this older city, they still roam. But have no use for feet anymore. Not till the end, anyway, when they'll come back. They'll come back when he'll rise. But till then he sleeps, he dreams, he yearns. He yearns for me. Dear God, save me.
For the sake of what was gleaned from the papers I'm about to read, it is important for me to prefix exactly how I came by them. They were delivered to my office in North London on the 28th of October 2017, by hand and totally anonymously. Beginning in the April of 1997 and concluding only a day before their delivery to me, they claimed to know special information about one of the most disastrous events on American soil in the past century. Often referred to as America's Chernobyl, the destruction of Innsmouth has cultivated the minds of investigative journalists the world over, especially my publication. In the winter of 2007 to 2008, this seaport town in Massachusetts was subject to a series of investigations and eventual raids on behalf of the federal government, culminating in a full-scale invasion of the peninsula by both land and sea. At the time, it was disguised as a drill, and the presence of an attack at all was covered up. This was possible due to its remoteness and the fact that it hadn't been used for its purpose since the 1940s. But this ultimately fell through due to industrious reporters like myself, and of course the rise in the digital age that was happening at the same time. For a while, an inquiring soul saw it as little more than part of a spasmodic war on terror and an attempt to arrest some cell that had cultivated itself there. It claimed no casualties, despite the brutal firepower used upon the land, and even rumored usage of a depleted uranium bomb. But no official charges were brought against its inhabitants. For one simple reason: there was no record for the birth of any single one. They had no identities recorded by the official government, no incarcerations either. But photo and video evidence of people being herded into vans and spirited away was very present. Keener news followers, however, also gravitated to the rumors of Guantanamo Bay, human rights violations, and even the words concentration camps being bandied about. These were dismissed by most of the papers, apart from one news site widely discredited for its wild policy, hosted by an infamously animated Texan. However, they were also the first institution to share whistleblower footage of a high-tech submarine bombarding the nearby Devil's Reef with a barrage of torpedoes. On the other end, numerous liberal institutions made some complaints and inquiries, though, according to rumors, they were discouraged by the threat of camps themselves. And so, for once, representatives became surprisingly passive and reticent. The reputation of a wild Innsmouth has long since frightened the nearby towns away, and they whispered of half-dead, shadowy Innsmouth, but said little to the outside world. This was, however, how the government wanted it for a long time. And just for over a decade, they did so with legislative powers as well as with cultural soft powers. Though I am finally going to break this ban on speech with the publication of the papers that were delivered to me.
At the coming of my age, I endeavored to explore the interesting architectural aspects of New England whence my family is derived. This was in the autumn of 1997, and the turn of not only a new century but millennium, and I derived much pleasure in this exploration of specifically historical sites. During this time, I spent a few days in the pleasing coastal town of Newburyport, where the museum displayed a small yet rich exhibition on anthropological discoveries from across the world, brought here in the early 19th century by an especially fortunate captain of some local repute. A samurai suit of armor handsomely displayed by the tools of his late wearer's trade. Spears of numerous African tribes from across the continent, and a fine collection of weapons from the Polynesian nations. Between the grinning, scowling helmets, spiked, speared prongs, and feathered headdresses of those archaic displays, I was endeared to a sense of mysticism, cultural richness that I fear had all but been chased out of the West across the prior century. It began to dismay me that such items were no longer a surprise to me as they would have been to an ancestor, and no longer had the cultural impact that the wearers and builders would have had, but had been categorized into mundanity by a kind of Enlightenment-driven barbarism that ironically sees all traits of indigeneity as inherently barbaric. The one item that particularly caught my attention, much to my future dismay, was a tiara of great beauty displayed on its own, and for good reason. No matter where I tried to place it, it fell within the boundaries of no known historical or modern art form. Though, strangely enough, many of its facets seemed to resemble almost every culture I had ever known. The positioning of the horns, as best I can describe them, seemed absolutely Sumerian, while also seeming reminiscent of the arrangement of the front decorations and general tall triangularity on the headdresses worn by the indigenous cultures to South America. Had it not been dated at 200 BC on its label, I would have sworn it was a modernist sculpture based upon merging multiple historic cultures. It was as if I were looking at the fountainhead of earthly civilization, with techniques and skills that far outweighed our own attempts of similar times, as to almost decry them as imitations. Even the metal seemed out of place, for as it sparkled with a silvery glow, the color was more reminiscent of gold. Some alloy must have been employed. Consulting the accompanying label, it said, "Unknown origin, first discovered when brought into the seaport town of Innsmouth, 1873. It decided me. I had to find its origin. Something about it bewitched me. It was as though the style had evoked an ancient DNA memory, perhaps within all of humanity, as the roots of our history, for better or worse. That which set it apart from all other examples was not just the craftsmanship, but the specific style to the patterns and engravings upon it. The swirls hinted of cosmological understanding far beyond that of the time, across the world in all continents, and were deeply reminiscent of the tumultuous worlds of outer space, so beautifully portrayed by the Hubble telescope. In the engravings, though indeed comparable to the bug-eyed frogfish of many South American and Pacific Islander effigies, also seemed oddly simian in their gait, not just fish-like. Something about it gave me the most grave of existential quandaries. As though something about it seemed oddly familiar to myself. As though I were staring into this blasphemy of evolution, this humanoid fish, and yet it reminded me so much of myself. An almost guilty sense of kinship to these abominations was kindled in me. It made me shudder, but subsequently gave me ecstasy. The following morning, I boarded an ancient bus and made my journey there. It was isolated, even more so than I had expected. The railway had been dismantled in the 50s, and so the bus was now the only way in and out of that wretched place. Salt marshes, desolate plains, and a general grayishness of clouds that overshadowed the general grayishness of grass was all that could be found. The sun had barely risen yet, and the bleakness of the terrain seemed generally non-conducive to any other form of weather. Though I was welcomely disproven and enchanted to witness that at the full arrival of the dawn I was greeted by a grand rainbow flying across my horizon. The sea that beset me on my flank also glistened with the shimmer, silver-licking waves behind the gray-black hulls of cliff tops. The juddering of the near-empty bus jolted my attention away from the ever-beckoning horizon and the sea's deep embrace and toward some vestige of civilization. A broken-down stone shack beckoned onto the black stony beach as further to the bus's immediate front, a grand expanse of open field displayed an abandoned farm. Though moving further down the old and isolated farmhouses, a general state of shadow began to descend upon me. Each house seemed silhouetted from every angle, and though the time remained within the pre-noon hours, I was somewhat alarmed to find a general darkness and shadow engulf the place, almost as if the sun lingered within a permanent state of twilight around the settlement. Eventually, reaching a bend in the road, I first came face to face with the bay and the full extent of this rumor-shadowed Innsmouth. The place seemed more like the faded memory of a town than a working community, with a general sense of grandeur and memory being gradually eroded by the ever-crashing waves of modernity, hereby instilling a sense of civilizational senility. Buildings that seemed to be from the time of the pilgrims hosted odd, frog-like head statues in the window. The huddle of dilapidated buildings resembled a time of great beauty, though were now engulfed by the stench of wormy decay. A pervasive stench of fish engulfed the place, as its alleyways were likewise engulfed within shadow and spider-clad grime. Wood chipping, stone crumbling, sickness incarnate bedewed and bejeweled this forgotten place, just as its crown was bejeweled and bedewed by the indefinable gemstones and the dark frogfish. As I moved through its alleyways, I regretted my arrival, though my attention was taken by the spire of a church of stony European origin standing before this dilapidated New English town. Such an oddity demanded my attention, so I made an absolute beeline for it. Briskly yet cautiously stepping down the road towards this church, I noticed two strangely dressed men locking a gate, a great iron gate before me. Their black coats and wide-brimmed hats seemed odd, but within the character for isolated rural communities. Their odd and almost robotic demeanor was all too common for the descriptions I heard of the place. Their simian attributes of indifferent, inarticulate interactions were also matched by their flat faces, thuggish blank stares, and grunting communication. Strangely enough, they were familiar, very much so, as though I had recognized them from a book I had read or an effigy I had seen. When researching this Innsmouth town, I learned far more than I bargained for. The founder of this town in its modern incarnation was one Obed Marsh, an early 19th century sailor and explorer who latterly comprised the mythologies of many archaic civilizations he encountered to create his own Dagon cult, at least according to the official results. The man himself always stated that his religion preceded humanity, and all the civilizations of the earth can trace their lineage back to it. It was this that caught my attention. It was exactly what the crown's design suggested to me. In preparation for this trip, I had read a book on the obscure religions of the American East Coast, which defined the esoteric order of Dagon as a death cult. It worships creatures of the deep which were displayed via statues of Aztec or other Mesoamerican style, though also displayed strange and octopoid deities, as well as fish-like entities carved in turquoise. However, its symbol is decidedly Germanic or Slavic, employing the black sun effigy. These are quite odd choices, naturally considering the Middle Eastern origin of their god of choice, but this is remarkably outweighed by many of their own icons original to the cult. For in another church I had visited, a grimoire of the most evil displays of human insanity echoed and re-echoed these octopoid evils of their iconography. New Age displays of psychedelic demonology evoking tentacles, eyes, hands, and crowns, adorning cyclopean architecture that boggled the mind to try and understand. These fully illustrated pages also referred to the same ubiquitous humanoid fish as mermaids, sirens, but most commonly as the deep ones. Jagged houses that encapsulated it were like a wall of spikes, deterring all who would sit upon the grounds of this hallowed site. I was half expecting the same thing to be found inside these walls as I found inside the old wooden church, but just as I crossed the threshold and found myself within the grounds of that place, I watched the clouds sink away. The long-forgotten sun rays glinted through the vast windows like the grand eyes glinting at me from this vast behemoth of stone, asleep on the hill and waking up with merriness. I approached and gazed around as the crooked trees gazed down upon the town in the valley. They draped down like the fingers of exceeding age, hiding the gaze of this beast from the degradation he looked down upon. All I could do was look up and up above those rooftops of moss and twisted canopies of twigs. The light of the gracious sun bathed the tower in an iridescent beam of salvation. Moving inside, I passed the maw of this great stone giant and was welcomed into its heart by gentle yet totally overwhelming seas of light that bathed me as it flowed from the windows like the wash of the most nourishing stream. Taken aback by such a glorious change from the prior tone of the town, I blundered about the pews and choir stalls, radiant with a sense of the place. It had undoubtedly been moved brick for brick from Europe, England most likely, much like the palace whose hull now constituted the basis for Arkham's Miskatonic University. It was as if God had put it here in an attempt at salvation for its inhabitants. I even said as much out loud, and just then I heard a strange voice behind me.
Probably because he did.
A man in a dark coat stood before a sea of light coming from the window. He held a bottle of whiskey in his hand. "Come, drink with me." He beckoned me into the chapel and poured us both a whiskey. He seemed different to the others I had met. I think he thought the same of me. What? It's a 12-year-old Scotch. Hope you drink, young'un. Yes, thank you. I wonder, what happened to this place? Why did it feel like God's abandoned it here? That's 'cause he probably did. I thought this church was his salvation. Which is it? Does he abandon this place or give it salvation? Both. He left the place on his own, and then he left this church for the sad few still believe in him to cling on. Do you believe in him still? I don't know what I believe in anymore. But I keep this place safe. For some reason, they don't come inside here. Well, actually, I think I do know the reason. I got a shotgun. Nah, they don't seem to care, though. Like they know I'm the last hope this church has, and I'm on the way out. 60 years I've been preaching here. I ain't never had no congregation, and I ain't never been canonized, neither. I'm just the last guy who read a damn Bible around here. Or a Torah, or a Quran, or a Bhagavad Gita. And believe me, I read all of them. The only thing you can do in a place like this is read. You get bored otherwise. My grandpa brought it over from England. He was a lord over there, but a Catholic. He wanted to protect it from persecution. Now, he chose to spend every penny he had on taking this thing somewhere it wouldn't get touched. But why stay here? No one's left. 'Cause I ain't got no money to move the fucking thing nowhere else. Nope. Someone's gotta look after the old place. And I ain't never been no priest, nor pastor, nor proper like. Ain't never completed no proper schooling either. There ain't never been no need, not in this town. But I'm as close to godly as you're gonna get in a place like this. I'll go with it if need be. They can't stop me. They don't care, though. They don't care about anything in this world. Worst I could do is talk to the press or someone from outside, so you keep fucking stum, as the English say. They're all waiting for us to die, you know, so they can take it. What, the church? No, not the goddamn church, the goddamn earth. You want to know what happened to this place? Back when this place was founded, there was a captain named Obed Marsh. Yeah, I've heard of him. Merchant type, you know? Yeah, I've heard all this before. You know he was in league with demons. I bet you didn't know that. He knew the sea like the back of his hand. He could talk any old something out of anyone out there. But most of all, he craved power. Sneaked his way into all the top places. He even had dinner with a president or two. And he befriended all the natives, all the islands he ever went to. Only to stab them in the back after, like, steal their resources. Steal their homes. Pillage their villages, bastard. But he were going after the biggest prize. He heard tell of this island from some Samoan types in the Pacific. And he heard tell of it from some descendant tribe of the Aztecs or the Incas or something like that, up near South America. It was ubiquitous myth. It could rise up from the ocean and back down, and them ruins was upon it. Pillars as tall as skyscrapers, carved with the swastika on them. Where'd you think Herr Hitler got it from? And heads like them Easter Island heads. But also these monsters carved into the pillars, heads, ruins.
And eventually, he triangulated all the directions he were given, and he found the fucking thing. They all said the same thing. Sea devils, demons of the deep, dragons of the abyss. And he wanted their power. A barbarian tribe went out there every year, commanding one human sacrifice. Usually a child. And then they bring a bounty of fish home. This tribe, they were killed by the other tribes in the area for being in league with these devils. But not before they give him the secrets of how to talk to these frogfish. And he did. He invited them. And sure enough, they came and the fish came with them, and we prospered. This town was a hub. Then, as he were getting near death, he started the churches. He started converting the churches. The first person to go was that one on the beach. That he turned near immediate, actually, though. He claimed that they were the servants of Dagon, the ancient god of Philistine, Samson, Delilah, and that stuff. And he was only the underboss for another god and another, in levels you could not believe. So, he formed this Order of Dagon. It started like a men's club, just get away from the wife for a little while. But soon, the oaths got worse and worse. And soon, there were telltales of fish coming up from the sea. They take young girls, young women, and they breed their way into the gene pool. And then, they take over. You'd hear screams from the beach. "Hail, Father Dagon," they'd shout. "Hail, Mother Hydra," they'd scream. They'd call out, "Cthulhu Fatagan, Cthulhu Fatagan." They'd scream. Oh, they had their gaze fixed on my church. But my grandpappy and my pa stopped them from ever entering. And before long, they didn't care. They thought we couldn't do nothing. They had their temples. We were stubborn and didn't matter. The sacrifices got worse and worse, though. At the cuneiform tablets, the Sumerians and Dagon, they were etched everywhere. They preyed on our people as they prayed to the demons. Then came the word sacrifice all.
Gallant American units, surrounded and cut off, fought in a sea of enemy armor.
World War II was devastating to the town. A whole generation of young sent into the meat grinder. I'm sure it was their doing. That bastard Hitler, he wore the same symbols they did. He wore the same symbols of the frogfish. His intellectuals prayed to the same heathen gods, the demons. All human children died, but the kids of those monsters stayed. Those big houses up near here, the rich, they still dine with presidents, You know what they do in the woods, boy? I was stunned. I wanted to find him mad, but for some reason I was captivated by what he said. Something about it had me in thrall, and I had to believe him on a visceral level. Well, not long after they got rid of the trains, this place died. Nowhere in or out but by their leave, and it's just how they liked it. And that ain't the worst of it. I began to watch as the light was refracted from the windows. The sun came through as a sea of magenta, as though it had not come from the sun, but from beyond, far beyond our worldly understanding. His words made sense, suddenly evoking the new light of that moment, as star winds, as best I can describe them, evoked the geometry of outer space. geometry I recognized from the crown. The Dark Ones! Oh, the Dark Ones! The Dark Gods! The man in the black suit! Oh, he's come here afore. He looks like a human, but he ain't. He's the messenger of them.
Who's he the messenger?
The old ones, the great old ones. They came from the stars millions of years ago. And some of them stayed. They are at war up there and down here. The king in yellow versus the high priest of Relia. The king, he's on our side, but the frogfish, oh, they're on the side of the high priest. They're on the side of Relia, them frogfish. The old of the town, they gone down there to the old city, deep below the sea. They all do. This is their breeding colony. They're getting ready for war. They bring them with them, congressmen, CEOs, and they make deals with them. But they're all of them deceived. They don't get no power. They become breeding factories themselves. They will either die as humans, or they will live forever as the cannon fodder for Dagon and Moloch and Beelzebub, the golden calf. They all die by the time they want to rise. But it's getting too close now. They're gradually coming back to the town. And they're stocking up. And them old houses up top.
He was hyperventilating at the moment and knocking back glass after glass of the whiskey. And I was terrified.
And those houses up top. You ever hear of a Shoggoth, boy?
No. What is it?
It's a weapon of mass destruction, that's what it is. They grown it in their labs thousands of years ago to destroy us. It killed a whole settlement from which all humanity once derived. That settlement in the Antarctic, decimated in a matter of weeks by these weapons that got out of control. They got them under control now, though, and they're gonna use them soon. They created us to be their slaves, and now we're not their slaves. They're realizing we're a danger to them. The low-level ones, anyway. The big ones, they don't care. We're germs to them.
The storms got more erratic, and visions began to plague me. I was certain that something was noticing us, and I was noticing it, or them, or whoever, whatever. I was certain that on the breeze I could hear piping of flutes. The piping flutes, the beating of drums. Visions filled me with those cuneiform tablets. And then beyond that I could see what they looked like, really looked like pulsating nebulous beings. And then... Shit! Do you hear that? Get out of here! Get the fuck out of here while you still can! I had to race. There's someone knocking at the back door of the chapel. I think they heard us. Run! I ran out the door as best as I could, and as fast as I could. and I was awash in the sunlight again. I ran, and I was in the streets again, and I had to get to that bus. It was coming soon, and I was not going to spend a moment longer in this wretched town. And as I was leaving, I saw a procession of people with broad shoulders silhouetted slightly in the distance, walking slowly up the path towards the church. They weren't taking any notice of me. I think they were coming for him, the priest, or whoever he was. I believed whatever I had got myself into, it was all behind me, but I was sorely mistaken. The worst was yet to come.